70 to 85% of all the crime in this county, it's all substance abuse related. And 90% of that crime is all opiate addiction related, where they're just trying to find money to get high. And you realize deep down inside, these are just broken people.
The kids in high school now and even in their 20s really have never been educated on the dangers of opioids.
My son has lost at least 6 of his closest friends to the opioid epidemic.
This kid are doing pills. This kid are doing heroin.
We want people to understand that their kids are getting the prescriptions right out of their medicine cabinets.
May it be your kid, your grandmother, your father, your sister, your aunt, you know, it's killing people.
We call the Eastern Shore the land of pleasant living, which it is. I call Talbot County paradise because I think it's as close to paradise as you can get.
There's a ton of shoreline, there's watermen, there's crabs, there's fresh seafood, there's outdoor stuff, there's waterfowl, there's hunting.
You see no skyscrapers, no tall buildings. I think the tallest building in town is probably 3 or 4 stories. The shops and the main street and the restaurants along the way, you know, it's small town America.
Talbot County really does look like a postcard. It's beautiful, but what people don't see is what the opioid epidemic is doing to our community and doing to every community in the United States. Who's becoming addicted? It's everyone. It doesn't matter what your race is. It doesn't matter how much money your parents make. It doesn't matter where you went to school.
And when you see these beautiful homes, you don't think that it's going on in that house because those people were privileged and it doesn't happen.
There's a lot of not my child, not here.
When you have more money, you can buy better drugs. Let's just be honest.
It is here and it is happening, and we do have problems.
I was a Maryland State Trooper for 28 years. I became a detective, and then I went into a drug unit, worked undercover drugs for a year. And then I was transferred in the State Police Homicide Unit, where I spent 17 years, went from an investigator all the way through the commander of the statewide unit. I also managed and supervised drug units for about half of the state. Me and my wife and my family, we spent 30 years here. Our kids have gone to school here. It is personal. This opioid epidemic's personal because I've coached kids whose brothers and sisters have died, and I've coached kids who are addicted, and it's a plague on our community. And I just really felt, about 3-4 years ago that enough wasn't being done. And it was because I just care deeply about this community. I care deeply about the people. The earlier a child uses substances, the more likely they are to become addicted later in life.
I remember hearing about my sister, starting to drink, doing weed, doing cocaine. I was like, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. I cannot believe people do that.
I was the poster child for going to school and bettering yourself, whether it was being on the field hockey team or being on the softball team or being homecoming queen.
But high school is still high school, let's be honest. In the spirit of partying, you're gonna find things.
Drinking and experimenting with different kinds of drugs, and because everybody else was doing it and we were just having a good time.
I grew up with an alcoholic dad and a brother who partied pretty hard, and I partied with my brother.
When I was a teenager, I struggled with anxiety and depression, and I found outlets to not feel those feelings.
I wasn't doing it to cover up feelings. I know a lot of people say their addiction started because they were trying to cover up trauma that they had experienced. That wasn't my story. I just was doing it in the spirit of partying, basically.
People don't set out to become junkies.
And I got the full ride to college. Graduated in the top 1% at Salisbury University. These are things that, you know, every parent wants their child to do. And I still found the drug world, and I still became an addict. So I met a boy, and I fell in love. Quickly found out that he was an addict. At first, it wasn't something I was willing to try, but, you know, love can be very powerful, and I tried it.
My addiction started basically in college, I would say. I was partying and, you know, kind of just doing the thing that everybody else was doing, kind of to fit in. That was kind of how mine started. It started with alcohol, and then it was weed, and it was cocaine, and then it was just experimenting with a bunch of stuff like ecstasy, acid, mushrooms, you know, basically anything that anybody was doing, that's what I was doing.
To find your way to heroin, like the top dog of opiates, so to speak, you just don't jump into it.
Our young people aren't going from alcohol, marijuana to heroin. It's the pills in between where they get fully addicted. And it's an opiate. You know, these pain pills are opiates. It's just like heroin. Heroin's an opiate.
It's a toothache, it's a broken arm, it's your mom and dad's medicine cabinet. It's easily obtainable through friends, but it starts as actual prescription medicine.
Pain pills, kind of like narcotics, it finds a way to like hook you. Like when you first start it, you get this initial high and you feel good, and you keep doing it because it feels good.
And at first I was just eating them, then I was snorting them.
They get addicted to the pain pills. They try to get off, they can't.
Not the first time, not the second time, but the third time I tried snorting pills, I was hooked.
And then they go to heroin because it's cheaper and it's more readily accessible.
A day of prescription pain medicine would probably cost you $300 to $400, and you could be high on heroin all day for $25.
If I had understood that connection 10 years ago, I think there would be some kids today that weren't addicted to heroin. I think there'd be some kids today that aren't dead.
June 16th of 1996, my brother Mark died of a heroin overdose. And I remember the guilt that I went through trying to hide the feelings of his death. And I saw this girl put a needle in her arm, and it looked like it all went away, and I wanted to try it. And she got down on one knee and tied one off and cooked up heroin for me for the first time. And she said, "Bruce, I want to let you know one thing before I do this." I said, "What's that?" She said, "Your life will never be the same."
I owned a home, and I had a job at Johns Hopkins Hospital as a nurse. Not only did I lose both of them, but I lost the person that I was. You lose your friends, you lose your family, because if you're like me, when you use, you isolate. You push everyone away because you don't want them to know the truth.
I made myself homeless because I didn't want to see anybody, didn't want to talk to anybody. My new address was Beach Street and New York Avenue, and I was the second sand dune on the left. And I made a little world out of driftwood and a construction tarp, and I lived inside of that.
So you pretty much become the shell of a person with no one around you, and it's very, very, very depressing. So I got clean the first 2 weeks of May. I found out I was pregnant the third week of May. My husband at the time knew that I had started using again, and we kind of just rationalized it for most of my pregnancy. I'll quit in my third trimester, I'll quit in my third trimester. When my third trimester came, and I would say to myself, 8 in the morning, okay, I'm not gonna use today, I'm not gonna use today. I have this person living inside of me I'm not gonna use today. There is no worse feeling or desperate feeling than not being able to stop using, even though you have a baby inside of you. I made the anesthesiologist give me a C-section because I knew that if I had a C-section, being a nurse and having a medical background, I knew that I would walk out the door with a prescription for narcotics. And that's what my daughter was for me for quite a few months, a way and a means to get more drugs.
And then you run out of veins, you know? And you got pits all over your body, and I got this big, looks like a bullet wound in my chest. Because I had a nurse open up my chest and put a PICC line in my heart. Because I was out of veins, so all I had to do was stick the needle into the little thing of plastic. Now that might repulse some people, and that's addiction, and addiction is ugly. Come July 10th of 2013, I had money, I had drugs, and I didn't have hope anymore. I didn't want to live. This was my best thinking. If I swim far enough, long enough, not even I can save myself. And I'll just drown and the pain will be over. So I got high for the last time. I got naked and I went into the Atlantic Ocean with the intention of not coming out.
We were in the throes of an epidemic. I could see I read the numbers, and 4 years ago we were looking at 1,200, 1,300 deaths. Now it's at 2,400. It's doubled just in the last 4 years in the state of Maryland. And, none of us had any idea that it would, that this thing, the death numbers would just continue to rise.
From compiling the data on the overdoses, the fatals, and the non-fatal overdoses, we were able to get a better handle on the problem, find out that there was more going on than what we realized, and that it was bigger than what we realized.
When I was a young state trooper, overdose deaths were less than car accidents in the state of Maryland. And this opioid epidemic, now opioid overdoses and overdoses in general are 5 times car accidents.
I ended up taking an overdose of medications. And at that point, I really didn't want to live anymore.
There would be parents that would say to me, I wish I had a child like Mariah. She was a cheerleader, she was a football manager. You wouldn't think that she was so depressed or that she had such anxiety, but she self-medicated. She tried ecstasy, and I know she was using pills and heroin at that time. There were plenty of times she said, Mom, I don't care to live. I don't care, I'm done. She would just call me and say she's gonna jump off the Bay Bridge. One moment she'd be like happy, one moment she would be so sad, and it would just get worse and worse and worse. And I thought, I don't even know what's happening to her. I woke up and around 6 in the morning, and I went to the family room, and the unthinkable. And Mariah was like, we had a sofa in the family room, and she was slumped over on the floor, like hanging off of it. And I go, Mariah, Mariah, Mariah. And she didn't wake up, and I'm screaming. And I said, Rick, come here, Rick. And I tried to, and she was already, I knew she was already, she already passed away, and I'm screaming. I couldn't even watch her being taken away. I couldn't watch her. I couldn't have that bag zipped up and see her gone. It was the worst day.
I ran for sheriff because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to change the way the sheriff's office was doing things in the drug fight. And it started my first day as sheriff with a woman who walked in and lost her daughter.
I think I knocked on his door the second day he was in office, and I was telling him my story, and we were both crying. And I knew I came to the right place, because I said, wow, he's really listening, and he really cares. And he said, we're going to do something about this.
Talbot Goes Purple was born as an initiative of Tidewater Rotary and the Sheriff's Office. We wanted to do something that we could really have an impact in the community, and we had heard Joe speak a couple times about the opioid epidemic.
Heroin overdoses, opiate overdoses are now the leading cause of accidental death in the United States for everyone under 50.
And so I went to Joe and said, hey, do you need a drug dog?
I said, no, I don't need any more drug dogs. I have a couple drug dogs. I need an educational message.
And he and I together sat down and really talked about it. As we were talking, we said, there's so much more we can do with this. So we said, why don't we take Talbot Purple?
Well, if you Google purple, it'll tell you the color purple means unity. In Talbot County, what it means is that we're coming together to fight this opioid crisis. That the color purple signifies that we're in the fight, that we're having those conversations, that we're educating people, that we're teaching our kids. That's what purple means here.
It really helps, I think, when you have the sheriff as your partner. Everybody took my call.
And we needed money because we don't do this with tax dollars. This was all donated funds.
There was not one business that we walked into and they didn't say yes.
There wasn't a business owner out there that hadn't been impacted by this epidemic.
The county commissioners to the mayor to the city commissioners, everyone on the government level said, yes, let's do this.
We started to realize that, wow, we're really going to get some traction with this. People, I think, are going to pay attention. You know, I give this talk to parents, and I'll say, okay, raise your hand if you talk to your kids about drinking and driving. Just what we would expect. All of our parents are talking about drinking and driving. How about if you talk to your kids about texting and driving? And I said, okay, raise your hand if you talk to your kids about prescription painkillers, prescription opiates. So what it told me is that we need to get that to 100%. We need everybody to be talking to their kids about prescription opiates.
There were so many aha moments for people going, what do you mean my Percocet is creating part of this problem? That's synthetic heroin. And people didn't know that.
I had one mom tell me whose son overdosed that she didn't realize that all the signs were there, but she didn't put the pieces together. She was missing a lot of spoons at her house. Well, people use that to shoot up.
I really believe that education is the key to us climbing out of this hole. You know, we have 75 messages that we're trying to push out to the community.
One of the key messages that the sheriff wanted to get across was we need to have a conversation with our kids. And we talked about not only at home, but also at school, and we did a school curriculum and made sure the kids got it there.
We went to the schools right in the beginning, and Kelly Griffith and the whole Talbot County public school system embraced this immediately.
We have worked with the Sheriff's Department and having all of our teams go purple. We have clubs set up in both of our high schools and both of our middle schools.
There were so many of them that stood up and said, my mom is using heroin. My uncle has a problem. I'm taking care of my brother and sister because my dad is addicted and he's not home.
If you empower kids, they can do amazing things.
And I think the Talbot Goes Purple gave them permission. They felt safe. They felt that they could say these things.
We had seen cases of where kids at a party, somebody overdoses, but everybody was afraid to call the ambulance or the cops because they were afraid they'd get in trouble.
The Good Samaritan law in Maryland basically says if you're at a party where there's underage drinking or there's drug use, and you call 911 for a medical emergency, that no one can be prosecuted at that party for any minor drug, alcohol offenses.
So he's been trying to get the message out, especially to the kids. Don't wait, go ahead and call. You won't get in trouble. He also wanted to talk about safe disposal of drugs in the home, and safe storage and safe disposal. And then also he worked into that about resources and where you can go if you have a problem, and Narcan if people around you might have an overdose.
We probably have the highest percentage of people trained in Narcan per capita of anybody on the shore.
Okay, we're going to talk today about how to administer Narcan, or naloxone, which is the generic name, I guess you could say.
Our health department has trained upwards of 800 people in a county of 37,000.
Naloxone reverses the effects of an opioid overdose.
It's a second chance at life. It's a second chance at maybe possible recovery for that person.
When I was 17, I really had enough. I was desperate to not use anymore. I did get put
you know, helping them with food, taking them to food pantries.
You know, a part of being in recovery is being of service to others. My husband is in recovery. He's got over 30 years, and his plan or dream that we could open a house for these people and care about them like no one else does. The research on recovery houses show that the best houses have a family-like environment, a place for everybody to sit together for meals, for activities, for meetings.
Dishes are done, things are organized, stove is clean, you know, all your spices. We have a bathroom that like I would let my mother use.
You know, last winter we had a period of 9 weeks where we had no discharges and no admits. All the guys were clean, all the guys were staying here, everyone was working on their recovery. It was amazing, and I thought we really have something special here.
When we started, we had 1 recovery house in Talbot. Now we have 5.
Every day, it's something different that keeps me clean, but most days it's my little girl.
I stay clean, daily meditation, daily prayer, a network of people. I work steps, I work with a sponsor, I talk to God, I'm involved in my neighborhood.
The recovery and NA world in our little town is such a blessing to be a part, and I'm a very active member in that as well.
And this is where God landed me. And this is why I care so much about this town, because it saved my life. And it made me feel important again.
When you walk into any Narcotics Anonymous room and you see people celebrating 5 years, or you see people going to the Gratitude House or the Humble House and they're leaving there after 12 months of sobriety and trying to start their life again, there is hope. I'm living proof of hope. If I didn't find that little sliver of hope, I might not be here today.
There's really nothing like seeing somebody get their life back, get their family back, get a job, and become responsible, productive members of society, and then coming back and saying thank you.
Every year, I never know how I'm going to feel on the date of Mariah's passing. And some years I never was able to get up out of bed. This evening, we're going to have an evening of love. And I thought, now knowing so many parents, sadly knowing so many parents that have lost loved ones, I thought, what a great way not only to honor Mariah, but to honor all of us. And we have photos, and we'll have candles, we have a remembrance table. And then the last portion of the evening, we're going to light a beautiful lantern that we'll all have signed, and that's going up to the sky, because that's where all of our loved ones are.
Each person has taken this on and has believed in it and are having those conversations and are sharing our messages and are, buying purple light bulbs and turning their businesses purple, turning their schools purple, turning their churches purple.
What these lights show is it shows our solidarity as a community. It shows that we're not going to hide, right? We're going to get out and fight. We're going to keep pushing forward. We're going to figure this thing out, and we're going to turn this thing back for our kids and our grandkids. Lucy and I, we're going to do this. It's you. It's the recovery community. It's the businesses. It's the citizens that have walked into my office. You're the ones making a difference. You are saving lives. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
One woman sent us a message last year that she came around the corner in Easton right when the purple lights went up. She said she's pulled over and she broke down crying. because she didn't realize her community cared about her that much, and she was just a few days into recovery.
And there was a father that picked his son up from football practice, and the son got in the car and said, "Dad, this purple stuff, it's not going to do anything." And the father started having a conversation with him, and an hour and a half later, the father said to the son, "We've just talked about this for an hour and a half." And the son said, "Yeah, I guess it is going to make a difference."
I've always said that Talbot Goes Purple will be the cookie cutter, the template for the Mid-Shore. Now, last year there was just one Purple County. Now, if you look at this year, there's Kent, there's Dorchester, there's Queen Anne's. I hear there's Sussex County in Delaware.
Those counties would reach out to us, we'd go and we'd present the template. We'd say, here's what we did right, here's what we think we did right, here's what we obviously did wrong.
I think we'll see not only a change in the substance abuse, but the mental health, the crime, the incarceration, and that's what gives me hope.
We can solve this, we can change this, we can have an impact on this, we can end this.